So I'm Karen Vanderwerken. I'm a AAUW California Director and Chair of the AAUW Fund Committee. I am a dual member of the Del Mar Leucadia and the Carlsbad Oceanside Vista branches. So good morning and welcome to our fourth and final 2022 AAUW Fund event. Since mid-October, we have had over 350 AAUW members who registered for one or more of these events, representing more than 70 branches. Each AAUW member attending, thank you for your time and interest. It truly inspires and motivates these women. By noon today, a total of 35 California scholars studying in California will have given short presentations about their projects. 24 students presented in October. Today, 11 fellows and grantees will show us more about who and what your AAU dollars support. This year, AAUW had 40 of the 320 National Scholar recipients, 16 American, which women pursuing full-time studies to complete dissertations, doctoral research, or research for publication. 6 career development grants, women pursuing a degree to enhance their careers, often in STEM fields. 3 community action grants, innovative programs that promote equity among women and girls. 12 international fellows, women who pursue full-time graduate study in the U.S. but are not permanent residents. And 3 selected professions, women pursuing full-time study in a master's or professional degree, also often in STEM. These exceptional recipients are pursuing academic work and leading innovative community projects to empower women. Your generous donations enable these gifted women to use their intellectual powers for the good of humanity. Our first speaker this morning is Tehrana Paramita. For her dissertation, she's exploring African rice genome to understand its domestication process. She hopes to leverage her research findings in improving food security through the creation of more resilient rice varieties. She is an assistant lecturer at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. And
I'm so sorry, that is not my bio.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. It's what we got off of our
Yes.
off our website. So I'll back off of that and let you talk about it. But you are an international fellow, and you're studying at the University of California American Studies and Ethnicity, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. We'll let you hop in there. Thank you.
I am so sorry to cut you there, but that is not my bio. So actually in the website, in the AAUW website, I didn't put my bio. It was someone else's bio.
Oh, okay. All right. We apologize for that.
Yeah, I have been in touch with AAUW and asked them multiple times to change my description, my research description, but until today it still hasn't made any changes. So I apologize for that. So I will
just go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Teraya Paramehta. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Southern California, and I'm in American Studies and Ethnicity. The title of my dissertation is Remaking Paradise, Race, Tourism, and the Aftermath of Violence in Bali. I'm from Indonesia, by the way. Thank you so much for being here, and I would like to thank AAUW for the support, and I'm very happy to be in this community of brilliant women scholars. Okay, I will just start. So Bali, Indonesia is a hyper-visible site that shapes the Western imagination of paradise. Although Bali tourism industry benefits from this imagination, it perpetuates the erasure of the global network of violence from the public discourse. My dissertation explores the production and construction of how Bali became paradise and how activists and residents' responses to violence in Bali disrupted and remade the imagined paradise. Utilizing interdisciplinary methods, the project highlights the ways activists and residents in Bali creatively reimagine paradise against strong neocolonial and neoliberal currents. Next slide, please. So the image you see here on the top left is The Last Paradise, an American discovery of Bali in 1920s. It is the first known English language travelogue on Bali, written by North American author Hickman Powell, published by Oxford University Press in 1930, still widely cited and circulated today in Indonesian publication about Bali history. I'm not surprised that the book is full of racist and sexist descriptions about native Balinese, given the 1930s context. The quotation here, for example, is taken from the introduction to the book by Andre Roosevelt, a filmmaker, adventurer, and cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, captured the admiration for the Dutch colonizers. This colonial legacy is still used today in Bali to promote tourism industry. The picture you see next to that is the below that is the welcome sign at Ngurah Rai International Airport in Bali I took on my visit in the summer 2018. It's a referral to Hickman Powell's colonial era book, Welcome to Bali, the Last Paradise in the World. Fast forward to 2006, Elizabeth Gilbert's memoir, Eat, Pray, Love, about her spiritual discovery during her travel to India, Italy, and Bali, Indonesia, became an international bestseller. Its 2010 film adaptation starring Julia Roberts further catapults Bali as one of the key destinations for spiritual healing and self-care. Yet, if we shift our focus away from the imagery of paradise and look a little closer to history, we will see a different story. Next slide, please. The two images you see here are taken at the Bali Bombing Memorial in Legian Street, Kuta, Bali, the main site of my research. On October 12, 2002, two suicide bombs exploded in the highly touristed area of Bali, Indonesia, killing 202 people, mostly Australian citizens. When the Indonesian government announced that the suicide bombers were tied to the atrocities in New York on September 11, 2001, ideas about national security immediately dominated the public discourse. Australia considers the Bali bombings their national tragedy, and Indonesian state at the time were desperate to create an image that Bali is still safe for tourism. What is at cost is the experiences of Indonesian victims and survivors that have been relegated to the periphery in the public discourse. That erasure is significant not only because it limits the space to grieve violent trauma, but also because it shapes the understanding of whose lives are worthy of public recognition and mourning and whose lives are not. Linking different violent ruptures in paradise, done by different actors, creating different effects, this dissertation posits that there is a relationship between maintaining the image of a safe paradise for tourist consumptions to a systemic silencing of the aftermath of violence. Under the facade of paradise, I ask, whose lives are privileged within the state imperative of securing paradise? This question takes on a renewed urgency given the COVID-19 pandemic, as tourism in Bali has plummeted again. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So this dissertation mainly argues, first, paradise as a politics of imagination is a nexus within which the racialized and gender differentiation of colonized colonizer is assembled. And second, the mystifying fantasies of paradise in both Western and Indonesian national imaginaries and unveiling its racialization processes are imperative to better understand the multiplicities of lived experiences and struggles in a post-colonial continuum. Next slide, please. So my dissertation consists of 5 chapters and a visual component. Because of time constraint, I will only share very briefly about chapter 2. The title is Marking Space, Memorialization of Grief. Next slide, please. So chapter 2 is based on my interview with active members of a nonprofit organization founded by Bali bombing survivors, Yayasan Isana Dewata, or YID for short. I investigate how, through ideas of memory and grief, lived experiences of the Bali bombing survivors negotiate, disrupt, and remake the notion of paradise in their own terms. YID focuses on advocating for Bali bombing survivors' well-being, and I follow their activism to purchase or release a plot of land in Legian Street to build Bali Peace Park near the bombing ground zero in remembrance of those whose lives were lost. This community park will diverge from Bali's existing ground zero memorial on Legian Street. Until today, YID is still unable to purchase the land to build the park because the owner of the land refuses to sell it to them. Not having much help from the national and local government, members of YID expressed concern about being forgotten and were critical about how the state handled their trauma. The existing tourism economy in Bali privileges profitable, leisurely culture over attempts to mend survivors' trauma and educate future generations about repatriative reconciliation. Unlike the retaliating US-centric post-9/11 narrative, the YID community seeks redress and reconciliation by cementing a narrative of grief into a neoliberal and post-colonial landscape. Hence, I understand their act of marking space to mean not only as an act of collectively grieving, but also collectively resisting. Next slide, please. This dissertation ends with an invitation to be aware of how post-colonial paradise works, and to explore, acknowledge, and navigate different struggles and collective complicity in paradise. When these narratives of struggle are read alongside the ongoing interrogation of the Eurocentric notion of paradise, we can understand what is really at stake for people who live in paradise and those who travel to paradise. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next student is an international fellow, Development of Liquid-like Semiconducting Polymers. She's studying at Stanford University in Chemical Engineering. Junko E is a postdoc chemist with a research focused on organic conducting materials. Currently, she works in Professor Bao's group in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Stanford University. During the grant year, she will continue work on developing liquid-like semiconducting polymers and investigating their potential as high-performance soft electronic materials.
Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to present my recent research progress here. I want to thank the general donation of AAUW to support my research here. So on the next slide. Hello. Yeah, so the general background of my research is related to the order international of things. We all know we live in a world full of electronic devices, and one future direction of the development of these IoTs is to make them into soft and skin-like devices. So that will bring more benefits to the health monitoring applications and the prosthetic applications. And if we take a closer look at of these electronic devices, the basic component of all the devices is called the transistors. So that can control the on and off and the level of the current. So my research is to realize soft and comfortable transistors, and that can further be used in the skin-like electronics. So on the next slide. Uh, so currently, there are many materials have been used for making transistors. Most of them are silicon-based inorganic materials. These materials have very good performance. However, they are also crystalline and very brittle. So that is not a desired properties to make this flexible and skin-like devices. So that needs some engineering to change the performance. And it also costs a lot to do the processing of inorganic materials. We know all the big fabrication companies are building this big manufacturing to make those. So in state of the inorganic materials, polymers are another ideal candidates. So polymers, you can imagine it as a chain composed of many organic small molecules that is made only by carbon, sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen. So they are pretty soft and easy to be processed in a low temperature condition. So that will be a desired property for the stretchable and the flexible electronic devices. And however, currently all the polymers have been developed for transistors. They are still limited by their low charge transport mobility. So that means these polymers cannot transport electron or hole very fast. So that limits their applications in these transistors. So my research is focusing on how to improve the charge transport mobility and make a better polymer materials for the flexible and stretchable transistors. So on the next slide, I have showed the proposal idea of my project. So I propose to use a liquid-like status instead of a solid conventional status to increase the charge transport ability of polymers. So on the right, the right down corner, you will see these polymers are stacking with each other in a cofacial mode. So then that is a perfect stacking mode for these polymers to transport electrons or holes from one chain to the other chain. However, this perfect alignment is not always the case in the solid status. On the upper left corner, you will see what is the real case is that this chain may be just stacked with each other randomly, while in the solid status, this unfavored stacking will be locked in the thin film, so that will block the charge transport. However, in a liquid-like status, they will have more freedom to break this unfavored stacking and reform this better stacking as the lower level shows. So that is kind of proposal of this project to investigate if the liquid status will help us to realize a dynamic favored charge transport in the polymers. So up to now, on the next slide, I show the current progress of my project. I have developed a semiconductor polymer. The structure is showing on the top level. So that is derived from a polymer called IDT-PT. This polymer has very high mobility performance to start with. So I changed the side chains to make these polymers into a liquid-like status. So you can see in the picture, so they are like a dark blue oil-ish status. So this liquid-like status has been optimized to make sure they have a low melting point. And so I'm still working on to fabricate devices, the transistor devices, to test the mobility, how well they can transport the charges of these polymers. And because they are this oil-like status, the stretchability and the flexibility test will be the next step. And and I will also kind of conclude all the results of this project in research articles and for publications. So yeah, that's all for my progress, and thank you for your attention.
We did mention that the girls changed the world, and they're doing it. Thank you so much. Our next student, Isha Podell. She's an international fellow studying at the University of California, Davis, International Agricultural Development, Compounding Impacts of COVID-19 on Food Security and Women Farmers of Rural Nepal. Isha is studying international agriculture development with a focus on gender equities at the University of California, Davis. She is examining the impact of climate change and other disasters on women farmers and vulnerable communities of rural Nepal. After completing her education, she will pursue a career as a research scholar and development practitioner with expertise on agricultural project management and gender equities in low-income nations. Isha?
Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm really grateful to AAUW for this grant and this opportunity today. I'm presenting about my master's thesis project, Compounding Impact of COVID-19 on Food Security and Women Farmers in Nepal. But before I start, I'd like to talk a little bit about my positionality in this research. I am an insider in this project because I'm from the same country as I'm researching, and I speak the similar language, and I understand the local cultural context to some extent, but I'm also an outsider because I'm a graduate student who's pursuing a master's degree in an American university, and I also do not share the similar life experiences as my research participants. So I've tried my best to reflect on my biases in this research through journaling and cross-verification with the local experts. This project would not have been possible without the collaboration with community organizations, research participants, my local women farmers from the communities, and so I would like to acknowledge them all, and also I'd like to acknowledge my principal investigator, my advisor, Dr. Amanda Crum. Diving into the main topic, we know that COVID-19 and control measures employed by governments of different countries all over the world have vastly affected the food systems. In low-income countries like Nepal, almost 3/4 of the total population is involved in agriculture, but the country's economy is largely reliant on remittances from mail-out migration. So women make up more than 80% of the agricultural labor force. They shoulder a triple burden of responsibilities within and outside the household, but they have limited access and control over resources. So during the pandemic, when the mobility restrictions were imposed by the government, studies have shown that more than 11.6% of households were driven towards food insecurity within the first 4 months of pandemic. We know that women and vulnerable populations are at a greater disadvantage during and after the crisis, but crisis could also offer an unique opportunity to develop sustainable and resilient food systems. Understanding the implication of the impact of crisis could potentially uncover underlying gender inequities, and it could also contribute in closing that gap. So in our research, we're trying to look into 2 of the most remote areas of central and western Nepal that typically experience 3 to 6 months of food insecurity in a normal year. So migration, the mail-out migration is the most common phenomenon in order to cope with that critical period. Moving on to the next slide. The objective of this study was to understand the short and long-term impacts of pandemic, the coping mechanisms developed by women farmers against already existing food insecurity problem, and how those changed or did not change with pandemic. We were also interested in understanding how their experiences are shaped by the different identities as they try to cope with the crisis. Moving on to the next slide. This research is guided by intersectional and subaltern feminist theory. The lived experience of our research participants, the women farmers, it greatly differs based on their identities in a community. And their own experiences and knowledge shapes this research, so they are the active agents in the process of knowledge generation. This summer, I was in Nepal, working in collaboration with the community organizations who were starting kitchen garden project in these rural communities as a part of their food security program in Nepal. We collected data through qualitative and participatory methodologies like semi-structured interviews, focus group discussions, transit walks. And you can see in these pictures, we were trying to be where they were and do what they were doing in their space during the data collection process. We also did some soil sampling from the community nurseries and developed cropping calendar with the lead farmers in collaboration with the local organizations. Moving on to the next slide. Coming back from the field work, we are currently sorting and organizing our data for transcription coding and analysis. And in the interest of time, I won't be going into detail about the results, but our preliminary findings suggest that in areas with limited food security, crises like COVID-19 compound the challenges, particularly for women and marginalized people. As for our next steps, we are sharing the immediate results we have in the form of soil test reports from the community nurseries and crop calendar developed by the community leaders in order to help them utilize it in their kitchen garden project. We will be working with our remaining data to analyze the answers to our specific research questions, and hopefully we'll be able to share that result with you all soon in the future. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or anything that you'd want to talk about this research or the project in general, I'd be more than happy to. So please reach out to AAUW and they'll help you connect with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next student is an international fellow, Yingyi Gi, One Child Nation, Multiple Realities, an analysis of child health disparities in China, University of Southern California in Spatial Sciences Institute. Her work situates population well-being in the broader and changing social context across generations. Her doctoral dissertation focuses on child health disparities in China. Her involvement in various international research projects has led her to motivation in researching how the well-being of women and their children is linked to social policies that are often not written by the women themselves. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Karen. I want to start off by saying that I'm really grateful to AAUW's International Fellowship to support my work. I want to give you a brief introduction to those of you who are unfamiliar with the one-child policy, which is the focus topic of my presentation today. It was introduced in 1979 in China and ended in 2015. So it has been implemented for over 3 decades. It is a policy not written by women, but it has affected millions or billions of women's lives. So next slide, please. So in my dissertation, in this project, I mainly want to understand the social consequences of one-child policy, especially on gender equality. It has been controversial whether the policy has contributed to gender equality or not. So we have this generation of singleton girls who is unprecedented before, which is very rare before the policy. But then with the policy, we have this generation of singleton girls growing up. People say, oh, that's an indication of gender equality because these people no longer want a son, which is a very traditional value towards some preference in the patriarchal society like China. But then there's also another line of evidence suggesting that the policy has contributed to a severe level of growing gender inequality, as demonstrating in those skewed sex ratio, excessive males, a lot of missing girls. Basically, we have a lot of non-singletons, especially non-singleton girls who have a male sibling, which account for over 1/3 of the child population in China. These girls have the most disadvantaged health outcomes because they have to compete limited household resources with their male siblings. these girls are a clear indication of gender inequality. So this is what we know about our one-child policy. It has been controversial. And in this project, I really want to recognize that when people talk about China's one-child policy, people often think of it as these universal social forces that lead children born into these different families on whether they are the only child of the family or whether if they're not the only child, whether for girls, they have a male siblings, right? This is all we know, but we know less about the fact that children are also growing up in very diverse family contexts, for instance, measured by the prevalence of singletons. That is, one-child policy itself, the name itself is kind of a misnomer. In many places, it's not one-child policy, it's 1.5 child policy. If your first child is a girl, you're allowed to have a second child because that's the policy trying to account for the huge amount of rural population. There are some preferences. So in the next slide, please. In the next slide here, I really want to show you how different the population level of the policy uptake it is in China. So in this graph here, you're seeing that each dot represents one local community. Here, I plot out 12 provinces in China. We can see that the preference of singleton families across local communities basically ranges from 0 to 100%, which is substantial spatial heterogeneity of the population level of the policy uptake. However, despite this very diverse family context children grow up, little is known about the child health consequences of such social contexts. Next slide. So the research question I asked in this project is, would non-singleton girls' health outcomes get better or worse by living around many other one-child families? That is, because in the social context level, we see this very different population uptake of the policy. So do we see like worsen or better gender equality as differ by different policy contexts? Like as the policy gets stricter, do we see like exacerbated gender equality or the other way around? Next slide, please. To answer this research question, I use a large-scale quantitative data called China Health and Nutrition Survey. It is a survey that covered most of the period when the one-child policy was implemented. So it's the best publicly available data I can find. So it includes a wide range of population and geographical data across China here in 12 provinces. Next slide, please. So for this project, I already have some preliminary findings. Basically, I found that as community preference of singleton increased, that means as the policy strictness level increases, I see these exacerbated health gaps between non-singletons and all other children. And it is the largest gap when the community is like many population uptake the policy. And this gap is the largest between non-singleton girls and singleton boys, denoting a very clear exacerbating gender inequality. And I think the findings signals these multi-level disadvantages that non-singleton girls face, not only from their families for the competition of household resources with their male siblings, but also some sort of like societal level mechanism that exclusively not favoring these girls, but only singleton boys. To me, it still signals this like stronger some preference, even though the policy is stricter. So for the rest of this AAUW fellowship year, I hope to wrap up this paper and to get it published and conference presentation by June next year. Thank you.
Our next student is Tamar Gilagashvili. She's an international fellow. Conversation with a very happy woman, California Institute of the Arts filmmaker. Tamar's art making practice focuses on the trauma of non-West-centric feminist movements. Her most recent documentary, A Very Happy Woman, investigates the tradition of marriage by abduction in Georgia and its effect on the way her mother and her grandmother conducted both domestic and public selves. During her Master of Fine Arts studies, she hopes to expand the scope of these stories and open a greater dialogue around such traditions. Tamar?
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction, and thank you, AAUW, for this amazing opportunity, for financing my studies and giving me a platform to speak about my work today. I'm beyond honored to be a part of the AAUW community. So yes, The Conversation with a Very Happy Woman is a documentary on marriage by abduction in Georgia, and it is second volume and a dialogue of sorts to a documentary I made a year and a half ago called A Very Happy Woman. The goal is to shed as much light on bride-napping as possible, fruit of which will hopefully be active change, more education, and more resources and progress towards healing for many generations of women in Georgia. On the next slide, I will give a bit of context on the origins of marriage by abduction in Georgia. Historians debate whether it's spread through the East, meaning Central Asia, or whether it's indigenous to the Caucasus. But all parties agree that it became increasingly popular after the fall of Soviet Union in 1991. Men abducted their intended brides by force or deception with help from their male friends. A night spent in captivity amounted to marriage, as whether or not a rape occurred in the eyes of society, she's regarded to be disgraced. In 2004, marriage by abduction became a criminal act of kidnapping, but it continues to go on unpunished by practice. By claiming that kidnapping is a part of centuries-old tradition, allows perpetrators and Georgian authorities to brush off these crimes. Even after 11 years, 576 underage school students quit school due to marriage in 2015. However, many civil rights activists consider this statistic to be inaccurate and suggest that the actual number was much larger than it was officially declared. Although kidnapping is almost not practiced anymore, especially in the urban Georgia, there are still rural villages where this tradition persists. It is a heavily patriarchal system upheld by delusions of tradition. At the same time, it is partially perpetuated through the cycle of generational trauma. Young girls are raised and taught by those who were victims of bride-napping. Thus, due to a lack of otherwise perspective and education, they believe it only to be natural to be married as a product of a violent act of kidnapping. On the right here, you see my parents. December 1997, my mother, Teag Okhadze, was kidnapped by my father, Alexandre Giligashvili. A year later, I was born. In the next slide, I will speak about the progress. I began working on understanding and researching the sociopolitical and psychological aftermath of marriage by abduction back in 2020 as a part of my undergrad thesis at Bennington College. I made a 35-minute documentary film that centered around my family, specifically the journeys of my mother and paternal grandmother, both victims of kidnapping. Most women in my family were went through the custom of marriage by abduction, and I had never truly grasped how that and the complex family dynamics that come with that shape a person, especially one that's assigned female at birth or identifies as a woman. Despite my short film being received with the highest of regards by academia due to its low budget and craftiness, it did not do well on its festival runs. Out of 30 festivals, only 3 accepted. Baseline is I felt as though a lot more work and restructuring and reprioritizing had to be done in order for me to make my work more digestible and effective in its mission going forward. So for the future, over the course of next year, I'm going to produce a 2-part short, a part that focuses again on the journey of of women in my family, and another that tells stories of women in Georgia who managed to escape their kidnappers and the kind of course their life took after. I'm at a different stages of process with both. Currently, I'm experimenting with form and textures of my work. I recently shot projections of familial images over a net of honeycomb packing paper that I sewed together. Honeycomb packing paper is used to package fragile items. It serves both as a reminder to myself to tread lightly and a reaffirmation of the sheer sociopolitical weight of the subject matter I'm dissecting. At the end of this academic year, I hope to sew honeycomb packing paper nets the size of an entire gallery space for immersive installation experience, where I project these familial images and design soundscape for people to walk through the space and have this be a preliminary look at the final screenings of my film at the end of spring. Simultaneously, I'm going to send Conversation with a Very Happy Woman out to festivals worldwide. I would like if we could please show the teaser for A Very Happy Woman now.
ჩემ გაზრდაში გეხმარებოდა? მეორე შვილი რატო გაუჩინა?
გამომართვა.
კარგად გიჭირავს. აი ამას რო გაიზდებიან, ვაჩვენებ ბავშვებს, 5 წუთიც არ გინდა ბავშვი დაჭერა ხელში. მოთხოვენ პასუხს. ო.
არ მიყვარს ამაზე საუბარი, იმიტომ რომ მაშინებს მე ფიქრი.
ყველაზე რთულად რა გახსოვს იმ პერიოდიდან?
შეიძლება იმის გარეშე.
გადაღების გარეშე.
რატო გაინტერესებს ეს?
ფილმს ვიყავდა.
არ მინდა.
On the next slide, of course, my art making practice is heavily based on feminist activism, and I do not intend for its work to fade at the boundaries of academic art. The 3 years of my master's program is designed to continue the exploration of bride napping and other feminist topics in Georgia. I'm working at broadening the perspectives around alternative needs of feminism in non-Western countries. And in the interest of time, this is where I'm going to wrap up. But if you have any questions, inquiries, resources, or want to collaborate, and any of that is welcome. So please reach out to the AAUW committee and they will put us in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to switch gears for a couple of minutes. Judy Horan has come to us this morning to talk to us a bit about the AAUW Legacy Circle. Judy is well known in AAUW land. She was a charter president of her branch, the Corona Norco branch, in 1973. She's quickly had a number of leadership positions at the state level and on state committees. She's also been a regional director for California on a national board. She has quite a few years of service on national committees. And several years ago, Judy was one of the national chairs for Charting the Course, which raised over $1 million for the fund. Her devotion to the Legacy Circle began at its inception, and she is a tireless advocate to help members understand the necessity of leaving a legacy. She clearly has shown us the way. Judy?
Good morning. It's nice to be with you. And I know I have a lot of friends out there. And like you, I am blown away by the fellows every time I attend or see one of these Zoom presentations or the luncheons in the past. We certainly choose wonderful people and they do wonderful things. So anyway, I'm very happy to be here this morning and give my, I guess you'd call it a sales pitch for this Legacy Circle, but it's really more of a don't you want this to continue speech. After you're gone, I'm sure if you're a longtime member, you are on this Zoom because you love AAUW and you are for the mission, and we want to help women and girls all the time. So leaving something in your will is easy in AAUW. It's a good plan giving thing for you to do. Look it over. There are many ways to do it. You can, insurance, you can lose a charitable gift annuity, remainder trust, all kinds of things. And you can get information from me. I cover Southern California, or Sharman Gehring covers the North, and we interchange, so it doesn't make any difference who you contact, or you can always go directly to AAUW National and just put in Legacy Circle form and you'll get the form. It's very simple. We want you to know that we appreciate everybody. We have little contests going on all the time, so I always want California to be first. So there's always a pitch out there. And those of you out there who are Legacy Circle members, I implore you to try to get other members of your branch. Be the example. Tell them why you did it. Tell them when you did it. Explain how this can really help girls in the future. And I know that we're all living in very unsettled times here, so we want to leave good things for our young women in the future. So I'm hoping that you will consider this, get in touch with me or Charmin or anybody at the national office. There are people there to help you. And we really would like you to be a member. We keep in touch with our members. We talk to them. We take them to lunch. We send cards. We love everybody on the list. So I'm hoping that you will take some time to consider this and talk to some people in your branch who are members. And of course, the visible sign that you're a member is a beautiful pin that you get, which is a gold wreath adorned with pave crystals and trimmed with a gold ribbon that proudly proclaims a legacy of equity. At the base of the wreath is an open book with a suspended pearl. And we hope that you will join and proudly wear this pin and have people ask you, how can I get one of those? So I wish you all good luck. Congratulations to the fellows. I wouldn't be the quote person if I didn't leave you with a quote. So Dolores Huerta was a longtime Hispanic feminist, said, "That's the history of the world. His story is told, hers isn't. So let's get hers told." Thank you.
Another person whose shining light leads the way to us, has been for a number of years. Well, we're ready for our next student, international fellow, Stephanie Cinco. She's working on a master advanced study in maternal and child nutrition. She's studying at the University of California, Davis in health and nutrition sciences. She's a student in the Master in Advanced Study in Maternal and Child Nutrition, a graduate program that is part of the UC Davis. She is interested in supporting women during pregnancy, postpartum, and lactation period. After finishing the graduate program, she wants to become an international board certified lactation consultant and be able to guide parents and infants during lactation periods to achieve an optimal health status. Stephanie.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you to AAUW. It's a huge honor to be part of this international fellowship. I'm an international student from Mexico, and I'm doing graduate studies in California. The program's name is Master of Advanced Study in Maternal and Child Nutrition, also known as MCM program. On the next slide, you will see, next slide, please. Thank you. You will see an overview of what the MCM program is, which is designed to provide a strong scientific background in maternal and child nutrition to professionals, training us to design, implement, and evaluate nutrition intervention programs to mothers and children from a wide variety of cultural, ethnic, and social backgrounds. On the next slide, you can see the program structure for the whole 2 years of duration, all the core courses that we take, as well as seminars, elective courses, and at the very end of the program, in the last quarter, in order to graduate, we implement every skill we learned during the master to create a project practicum or capstone that could involve research, clinical practice, or evaluation of scientific evidence in nutritional interventions. Moving on to the next slide into a different topic, you will see the IVCLC logo. IVCL stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, and IVCLC is a member of the maternal child healthcare team that specializes in the clinical management of breastfeeding. Getting this certification is part of the goals I want to reach once I obtain the master's degree, since the MCM program will help me to obtain the requirements to be eligible to take this the IVCLC exam. On the next slide, I would like to talk about the internship I'm participating in, the Reduce and Extend the Bottle Use Among Weak Families. WIC stands for Women, Infant, and Children. This program supports low-income pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and children under the age of 5. WIC provides healthcare and nutritional services. In the internship, in the UC Davis side, I am working with the UC Davis Human Lactation Center, and this lab is collaborating with the California Department of Public Health Week to create educational material for staff and participants in this project, which includes messaging and education to reduce extended bottle use beyond 40 months old and the use of the bottles in bed. But then why is extended bottle use a problem? On the next slide, you will see some of the main reasons, which are that toddlers can be in risk of develop tooth decay, be exposed to excess of meal intake, anemia, and sleep disorders. So what can we do to address these situations? On the next slide, I will show you the paths. In this project, we have 2 paths for COPS use education, and we hope that these paths are going to help families to achieve the process with success. First, on the preventive side, we are working on creating classes for parents of younger children, which are the ones with babies of 9 months old. They're ready for a COP class. Then to support this intervention, we are going to create messages, resources, and training for the staff who are counseling families. And implementing these 2 strategies, we want to lead the families to have a timely COP use and avoid any health risks for the children. So on the next slide, you will see the timing plan for the project, as well as some of the goals. Right now, we are working on the first phase that covers September, December of this year. So we are gaining understanding of the context for families using bottles during the day and in bed with children more than 40 months old. So currently, we are checking and analyzing all the available scientific evidence. Then the January, February of next year, 2023, we are going to be able to create messages that might be targeted to Spanish-speaking families, since a big percentage of the population in week participants are speaking Spanish families. These will help to support the families' efforts to use COP, same as the resources to be used outside of the regular appointments, such as short videos, something that they could have as a backup use when needed and doesn't take too much time to learn. So finally, as a student goal, working with Dr. Hennig, which is the professor who is leading this project in UC Davis, will provide me an amazing professional experience in work to add relevant information to the staff training. And the staff training we expect to happen between March and April of 2023. After all these steps, the project should be ready to use and implement in weak families by next fall in 2023. We hope to have a great and positive intervention in the health status of children, along with a strong support for the weak families. And on my final slide, I just want to thank you, AAUW Found, UC Davis faculty, and loved ones that are supporting my academic journey. Thank you for your time and your attention today.
Thank you. Our next student, Amal Alwardi, is in Career Development Grant, The Body as an Ecosystem, Intelligence of Soma from Cellular Respiration to Authentic Expression. She's at St. Mary's College of California. Her research through dynamic embodiment and body-mind centering utilizes biophysics of everyday activity to guide emergence of body consciousness and mental health, using the power of words to encourage authentic expression for underrepresented youths. Amal?
Thank you, Karen. I'd first like to express my gratitude to the AAUW community for this Career Development Award, which has allowed me to foster my own professional pathways during my master's candidacy at St. Mary's College of California. I'm currently in Moraga, residing on unceded Ohlone territory. As Karen mentioned, I focus on youth. So my main goal breaks down systemized formats of patriarchally constructed academic classifications and implements consciousness of direct experience for enhanced comprehension, specifically within frameworks of idiokinesis, which is visualization and imagining, and somatization, which is kinesthetic and tactile sensory information. So my research defines a bodily ecosystem, including thought and action, that allows feeling, perceiving, and creating physical and emotional sensations of self in resonance with others and the surrounding environment. So the next slide provides a link to a research database compiled by the International Somatic Movement Education Therapy Association, widely known as ISMETA. Here I maintain an academic internship updating myself and this newsworthy somatic community, which includes an exciting research initiative in association with the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. This research database illuminates concepts, practices, and effects of mindfulness and somatic movement through cognitive, motor, neurobiological processes and mechanisms, including autonomic nervous system functions and outcomes, and therapeutic applications for mental health. The next slide will share a little background, including definitions of soma and of somatics, which is rooted in Eastern practices of yoga, qigong, and other martial arts, and was first coined in the West by Thomas Hanna. During my graduate studies, I immersed myself in somatic seminars curated by professors Rosana Barragan and Elizabeth Randall Rains, including extraordinary female pioneers in somatic sciences such as Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, Martha Eddy, and Sandra Fraley. I was inspired by Bhutto artist Dr. Fraley in the prologue of her aptly titled book, Moving Consciously, where she discusses how the vital body, or soma, is the conduit by which senses interact with inner and outer perceived phenomena, ultimately shaping lived experiences. This foundation of study informs how movement expression facilitated transformational change while I researched the biome of my body existing relationally as part of a greater whole. I examined my human body systems, including my sensory motor system, by witnessing its reactions and actions and learning how adaptive neurocellular networks naturally display biophysical intelligence. One of my favorite things that Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen says is, don't take my word for it, try it yourselves. So let me give you an example by what I mean. We've been staring at a screen, maybe sitting, maybe standing in one position for about an hour, more or less now. And if I ask you all to take a moment and witness your own breath, perhaps suddenly your lungs might expand a little. Perhaps you might sense your spine elongate a little. Perhaps you want to breathe more deeply and adjust your body a little bit. So enlivening these cells through awareness of breath is one simple beginning somatic practice, which promotes alignment of physical and mental health. Our expanding and condensing breathing mechanism demonstrates how the human body elicits an instinct for survival from a cellular level. So this informs the approaches to health and education to which I am drawn, as seen on the next slide. These are just a few of the multitude of somatic modalities that empower female learners with agency in developing their processes and expressing their experiences. Body-mind centering was created by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, which initiated my studies of human developmental patterns and continues to cultivate my curiosity. I also am being certified through dynamic embodiment workshops with Dr. Martha Eddy, where we focus on embodied physiology and conflict resolution techniques. During my Feldenkrais workshops with Amy Schulman, I research awareness through movement, healing by permissiveness, literally allowing oneself to sense inner and outer interactions. So using these practices for discovery, I aim to diversify scientific research and build platforms for female equity by promoting administration that permits teachers to shift focus to lived experience rather than product, so girls can feel an embodied connection and develop access to self-esteem, confidence, and self-advocacy. This also alleviates fears of body image and intellect and names ableism to include neurodivergent and disability justice. These methods, as practiced by the creators, have provided evidence of renewed cellular vitality. For example, on the next slide, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen explores an anatomical, embryological, and developmental foundations of movement and how they relate to our psychophysical processes and well-being. And though it's impossible to condense her lifetime of research, work, and theory, we can take a moment to briefly explore another of the 6 basic developmental patterns developed here. So if you're sitting, maybe you have your feet placed flat on the floor, and maybe your hands are resting on your thighs. And perhaps you can feel your sits bones maybe sink a little bit into the seat where you're resting. And if I ask you to put your hand, just place your hand on top of your head, gently, just resting. You might be able to press your head into your hand and witness your sits bones also yield into the seat. So what we feel here is a vertical through line and an inner space, a voluminous inner space that gives us this support. And though this is what we experience going through the birth canal, right now experiencing this focuses attention on our spinal articulation and support to help prevent, correct, or soothe inflamed herniations of our vertebral discs, conditions which I commonly experience as an aging body, for example. And yet what it also offers young people is an opportunity to ground. And therefore, by grounding, they identify a sense of self and can then center and express with I statements what their needs may be. Next slide, please. Although there is no time to describe their very important work that will pave my future path, I leave you with a quote from Dr. Amber McZeal's somatic approach in Decolonizing the Psyche, and from Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. Should you wish to explore further information on somatics anchored in the fields of education and neuroscience, please find the next slide filled with offerings for you to peruse. And last, though certainly not least, I wish to acknowledge those who made this joyfully possible. Thank you so much to my teachers, to my mother, to my sisters, to my students, and to the AAUW Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Amal. Personally, I think a renewed trip to the fitness center is in order for me. I'm convinced. Our next student, Leslie Gauson Robleto, is an American fellow studying unmending bodies in Central America, University of California, Berkeley Art History and Criticism. She's a candidate in the History of Art department at UC Berkeley. During her fellowship year, she continues writing and conducting research towards her dissertation. She will finish her remaining chapters, which contextualize Bali's work alongside other Central American women artists working on social and political transition. Please welcome Leslie.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the AAUW for funding my studies this year through the Dissertation Completion Fellowship. We can go on to the next slide so I can begin to contextualize my project. Thank you. So my dissertation, Unmending Bodies, is a monographic project that looks at the work of the contemporary Nicaraguan artist Patricia Eli against the backdrop of post-war Nicaragua. In my project, I consider how her work, which constitutes a rich archive of paintings, sculptures, textile assemblages, installation, and writing, stages critical interventions in the public sphere that contend with themes of gender, femininity, sexuality, and social unruliness during a critical time of transition in the country. Throughout the chapters of the dissertation, I tend to transitions in Belly's practice against shifting social political ideologies by following the fall of the Sandinista Party, the victory of the right in the 1990s elections, which saw the first woman president in Nicaragua, Violeta Chamorro, and the rise of neoliberalism following the end of the US-backed Contra Wars. Next slide, please. By addressing these pivotal periods, I'm interested in how ideology is repurposed and represented during Chamorro's presidency and the anti-feminist policies that took effect during her tenure, which centered on traditional femininity and motherhood as the cornerstone of women's role in society by perpetuating familiar essentialisms that had been central to the revolutionary project, yet concealed through the discourse of Sandinismo. Taking textile as a primary medium and effective locus, I consider how Chamorro, who was known for wearing all white and presenting herself as the mother of the nation, mobilized textile as a mediating force to translate the aesthetics of her socially conservative and neoliberal regime. Beyond her fashion, textile also becomes a central indicator of shifting economic policy and the rise of international markets in the country, including the emergence of secondhand commerce and thrift stores selling clothes imported from the United States. By sourcing secondhand women's garments from these markets, such as dresses and intimate wear, Belly repurposes and recodifies clothes to create deconstructed corporeal topographies that index other bodies, while alluding to bodily parts such as genitalia or spines, as seen in Femalia in La Columna Rota, projected here on the screen, to reveal ideologies of biopolitical control and uncover asymmetries of power through circuits of commerce. Through these works, I explore how Belly utilizes textile as a discursive and erotic medium that centers the body and sensuality to rework notions of liberation through the discourse of autonomy, pleasure, and self-recognition. Within these bodies, we also see the artist surface the imagery of scars and mechanisms of healing to speak to personal and collective traumas. At the core of my project, I home in on Belly's commitment to crafting unruly bodies by exploiting the possibilities and conditions of gendered materiality and labor, typically associated with women's work and rooted in the memories of her mother, who was herself a seamstress. Utilizing mending as a craft-based technique and feminist strategy, I examine how Belly unravels patriarchal discourse and the tenets of national imaginaries by recasting bodies as uncontainable forms. Throughout my dissertation, I mobilize mending through multiple registers. Mending is both an act of fixing as well as an act of undoing. In the expanded field of her work, I'm interested in how mending is subversively deployed to bring different parts together, disassemble what is whole, and create new parts out of old parts. In this way, mending is both an act of violence as well as a gesture of rehabilitation, renewal, and regeneration. Next slide, please. As part of her practice, I also tend to the artist's participation in Artefacto, which was an artist collective and publication that formed in the 1990s and centered on experimental artistic practice. Declaring itself as an autonomous cultural zone, Artefacto resisted the ameliorating and stagnating effects of Chamorro's presidency through collective actions, publications, and exhibitions. As a collective body, Artefacto and its appendage, Artefactoria, emerged as an agitational force that foregrounded an anarchist revolutionary ethos of madness and unruliness that was unmarred by ideology and singularity. Next slide, please. Though my dissertation looks at the work of a single artist, it is also interpolated by rich case studies that place Belly's work in conversation with other artists working in similar modalities within Central America during this period. You can see this comparative and relational approach throughout the dissertation, but it's most acutely articulated in the third chapter, which situates Belly's work within the context of the exhibition Mesótica II, Centroamérica Regeneración, which took place in 1996. Curated by Virginia Pérez Ratón and Rolando Castellón, Mesótica was the first survey exhibition of contemporary art from Central America to take place within the region. In this chapter, I argue that the exhibition served as a foundational moment for regional feminist encounter in the arts, animated by the proliferation of conceptual and performative interventions that speak to gendered violence and pejorative social constructions, including feminized labor, as seen in the works like Viaje al Abismo by the Honduran artist Regina Aguilar. Brought together, these works come to form a collective corpus of feminist aesthetics that provide a counter-archive to official discourse by offering more expansive accords on memory and testimony that are rooted in the intimacies of everyday and domestic materialities. And here I've included a quote of Belly's reaction to attending and being included in this exhibition. So finally, I want to close by just noting that given the underrepresentation of Central American art histories in US academies, my work has required extensive field research into archives, museum collections, and interviews with artists, curators, and archivists, among other interlocutors. And it is thanks to funding sources like the AAUW that I have been able to travel, research, and fully dedicate my time to finishing my dissertation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next student has a career development grant. Rosalind Keogh, preoccupied artist, collectivity, ethnicity, and space in representing Tibetan subjects, 1960 to 2008. She is at Davidson College. Her research on the role of art workers during the socialist period of the People's Republic of China focuses on the representation of ethnic minorities by majority ethnic Han artists from the 50s through the 80s. Her new work on contemporary Tibetan artists examines the deconstruction of state-constructed ethnic, gender, and racial identities through contemporary visual practices. Her goal is to finish editing her first book, manuscript, and obtain tenure at her current institution. Rosalind?
Thank you, Karen, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining this event in the morning. And thank you to AAUW for supporting my work and my future goals. So as Karen pointed out, I am working on my book manuscript, to which I am hoping to submit for review later this year and get back reviewers' comments and suggestions in the next spring, which I'll use AAUW's fund support to help out with. Next slide, please. So this book project is based on my dissertation work that I completed at the University of California, Berkeley in the art history department. So that's where my training is. Currently, I am an assistant professor at Davidson College in the art and Chinese studies department. The book project in particular looks at how state artists, so artists who are employed by the states, and basically at this time, there were very few independent artists. Everything was run by the state. So how are these state artists integral actors in the creation of myths regarding Tibet's history, people, customs, and gender? And there are 4 major art projects that I am examining. The first is a group of paintings in the early 1960s by artists who were dispatched to Tibet right after after Tibet had a kind of revolt against Chinese rule in 1959, and that's when the Dalai Lama fled actually and went into exile in northern India. The second project looks at a film called Nong Nu, or Surf, from 1962. That was the first film to employ or cast ethnic Tibetan people in a film about Tibetan history. The third project is Sculptures, that was created by a collective group of sculptors during the year of near the end of the Cultural Revolution in 1975. And then lastly is Chen Denqing's Tibet group, which was produced a couple of years after the end of the Maoist or socialist, like strict socialist period in the People's Republic of China. There are three main goals that I'm trying to achieve through this project. One is to reconsider how artworks developed during the Maoist period shouldn't be considered as a breaking point or anomaly, but should be considered as a continuation of the modernist art movements that had taken place in the early 1900s and the contemporary experimental artworks that took place after the Maoist period. The second goal is to uncover the ways in which race and ethnicity, as well as national space, continue to be constructed through visual representations. And here I'm also looking at gender theories as a way to think through how ethnicity is being represented in negative stereotypical ways. And the third goal is to analyze how the conceptual shift towards defining artists as not just mere artists, but as art workers impacted subsequent development of Chinese arts in the 20th century and beyond. So in the next couple of slides, I have some examples of the artworks. The first is an example of the paintings that were created in the early 1960s. This one is by a woman artist who was trained in the socialist period. The middle is a still from the movie Nong Nu, and then the right is a publication or a photograph of the sculptures that are currently completely destroyed. Okay? And in the next slide, you'll see the work on the left hand is a small oil painting by Chen Denqing, who completed the Tibet series in the early 1980s, who returned to like extreme realism after a period of socialist propaganda. And on the right-hand side is an artist that I have interviewed extensively while I was in Lhasa, Tibet. He's a contemporary artist who also teaches and has PhD. He teaches at Tibet University, and he has a kind of a facetious approach to undoing or counteracting the stereotypes that are placed upon Tibetan ethnic people. So here on the right-hand side, you see he's using photography as a way to comment on the hybridity of Tibetan contemporary life instead of the kind of forever stuck in the past stereotype of a noble savage that was constructed in the 1960s to the 1980s of Tibetan people. So next slide, please. The project design has, again, case studies from the 1960s to the 2000s. And I've set it up so that there's a variety where I can do some comparisons. For the sake of time, I'll skip to the next slide. Next slide, please. So for research, can you go back? Yeah. For research methodology, I've used archives, museum collections, newspaper databases, popular pictorial magazines, films, and artist interviews during my long-term stay in Lhasa, Tibet. Actually, I told you that the sculptural exhibition and the installation from 1975 had been destroyed in the early 1980s when a new Tibet museum was constructed. I was able to track down the art worker or the art administrator who oversaw that project and participated in the creation of those sculptures in Lhasa. And he actually, when I visited his studio, I found the remnants of the sculptures just lying on the shelves in his studio, which was a surprising find there. And next slide, please. So the timeline towards publication is to submit the book manuscript for review by the end of fall, which is coming up very soon, receive feedback from reviewers in the late spring 2023, revise and resubmit the manuscript in May and June of 2023 with the support of the AAUW short-term publication grant. So I'm very grateful for the support that AAUW is giving for the continuation of my research and publication. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to divert over to the Munin Leche Giving Circle. Sharon Schuster kindly recorded some comments a bit earlier this fall. Sharon has held many leadership roles in AAUW and other organizations, meaning there were pages and pages and pages, and she just said, just say I'm involved. Most notably, she served as president of AAUW, the AAUW Educational Foundation, and the AAUW Legal Advocacy Fund before those three corporations were merged. She continues to support AAUW by leading the Munin Leche Giving Circle.
Hello. You may not have heard of the Munin Leche Giving Circle, a unique way to give to AUW projects. Munin Leche was the epitome of an AUW volunteer and giver, always going beyond what was asked to contribute in both time and money for AUW. 25 years ago, we formed a giving circle to commit to funding projects within AUW that might not have happened without our support. We funded the printing and distribution of a number of research reports, such as Crossing the Line about sexual harassment in schools, Solving the Equation, the variables for women's success in engineering and computing, and Deeper in Debt, women and student loans. Note that we are still working on these issues and many others that have been on AUW's agenda for many years. We funded community action grants in California when R&P funds ran out, and we have funded Get Out the Vote campaigns. Our commitment is always to projects funded with current funds rather than endowed funds. We choose the projects we want our contributions to enhance. Our individual commitment is to contribute at least $300 a year. That's if we've been giving at what we call the chocolate club level already. If a member has not been giving at that level, we ask for $500 for the first year and then to raise it to $1,000 in 2 years. Those that make such a commitment then become a member of the Giving Circle and participate in the decision-making about new projects. But anyone can make a contribution to the Giving Circle in any amount by noting that they wish their contribution to go to fund number 8229. We are currently in the process of working out the details of our next project, and you can be part of that decision. Contact me for more information, or if you have questions about the Munin Leche Giving Circle. Thank you.
Sharon? Our next student is Deja Darrington. She has a selected professions grant, higher education marketing, customer marketing in corporate. She's a Claremont Graduate University in marketing, and she's committed to overcoming barriers and disrupting negative stereotypes while opening doors for other women in marketing who look like her. For her MBA, she will focus on marketing courses like experiential marketing and marketing strategy. Her goal is to leverage data analytics, research, and innovation to make strategic marketing decisions that inspire change and drive results. Deja?
Thank you, Karen. And also thank you to AAUW for my fellowship and support of my degree so that I can continue my studies. Thank you for my background. Yes, I did higher ed marketing, and now I am doing customer marketing within the corporate world. So I'm managing programs and doing different like marketing strategies to build long-term relationships with customers. So in 2020, I wanted to go back to school and to further specialize in marketing so I can gain more business management skills and expand my network and opportunities. Next slide, please. So my school is the Peter Drucker School of Management. He was a very purpose-driven and human-centered thought leader in management. And his main philosophies that I identified with were that people are a business's greatest resource and that corporations should be community-focused and socially responsible. So as you can see here, my MBA program breakdown, I am working on research and frameworks, conducting case studies and also projects. And from those, I've learned tools to really blend my analytical skills while having like a firm grasp of the human dimension of business. And now as I'm at the end of my program, I'm diving deeper into a specialization in marketing strategy. Next slide, please. So in my strategy class right now, I am working on a group project. For the past few months, we've learned various strategy frameworks, and recently we had to come up with a strategy for 5 big ideas. And so our group decided to focus on sustainable business ideas and making a business out of the unutilized, because overproduction and consumption are the biggest and most difficult challenges in various industries. And among the top 5 industries that are contributing to waste are agriculture and fashion. Something that we learned in our sustainability for strategic advantage course was that creating environmental and social strategies can lead to new organizational competencies that apply broadly to very aspects within business management. So with our first idea, as you can see here, we're looking at upcycling clothing. We're looking into extending the life of old clothes and upcycling primarily for formal wear. So think of like wedding dresses, proms, and tuxedos. If you can think about the average number of formal wear that is purchased for weddings and special events, how can we prevent waste and reuse those materials? For our next idea, we're looking into a crowdsourced style consultant website/app where free styling advice and outfit rating is provided by users instead of being limited just for professionals. The difference with this idea is that users are going to upload their own internal closet to encourage new outfit combinations versus purchasing new items. And then another idea that we're looking at is a subscription-based service that allows users to contribute to and utilize checkout items for their everyday wardrobe, special occasions clothing, accessories, and more. And then our next idea is to address food waste and food insecurity at college campuses. With this idea, we're looking into nonprofit sector in a college towns that partner with local restaurants and different eateries that purchase excess food at a discount and provides ways and through like preparation of meals to serve students food at a discount. What's challenging about this idea is, of course, like the operations and logistics and how to procure food, and also like gaining alliance partners within college towns. So we're working through those details. And then our last idea is vacant retail space utilization, where with this venture, we would partner with retail districts to really fill vacant retail space with short-term tenants, exhibitions, and services. Pre-pandemic, vacant retail spaces hit all-time highs in many cities. So we want to provide a service to partners with like independent artists, local nonprofits, and seasonal businesses to really increase cultural offerings and draw new audiences. So with all of these ideas, rather than proposing a new product, we want to look at, what we're currently have and how can we make it more valuable for the consumer. Next slide, please. So with our 5 ideas, we're planning to regroup and narrow ideas down to 2 and then go through the process of these 4 steps. We pretty much have our purpose and vision and our business model. But for the remainder of the semester, we'll be working on steps 3 and 4, which is applying the strategy frameworks that we learned previously in the course and also testing these assumptions. So when you're developing a strategy for a new business, in order for it to succeed, many assumptions have to be proven true. For example, for our food waste idea, we'd have to prove that through research in our strategy frameworks that 30% of college students who are experiencing food insecurity at colleges are interested in purchasing food at a discount and potentially using our app service for delivery to their dorms. So that's what we'll be working on in the remaining half of the semester. And thank you again to AAUW for this opportunity, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deja. Our next student is Patricia de Nobrega Gomez. She has an American fellowship, geocorporal politics of performance and feminist strategies in Brazil. She's at University of California, Berkeley in performance studies. She's a candidate, a PhD candidate in the Department of Performance Studies with a designated emphasis in women and gender studies. Her dissertation focuses on the contemporary artistic production of Black and Indigenous artists in Brazil, whose works draw from intergenerational practices and non-Western bodies of knowledge. With the fellowship, she will continue this research and dissertation writing with the long-term goal of becoming a professor.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you everyone for coming today. I'd like to applaud all of my peers for all of their amazing work and for sharing that with us this morning. And yes, as I said in my intro, I would just like to reiterate, I'd like to thank the AAUW for supporting my research and for allowing me the financial support so that I can travel and do all this kind of research in Brazil, but also then come back and have the security to be able to just focus on the writing. If we can go to the next slide, I'll begin to share a little bit more about my project. So as was stated, I look at the contemporary work of Black and Indigenous artists in Brazil, and I place the contemporary artistic production in tandem with everyday performative actions of resistance and liberation as a form of understanding how else we can see protest and political workings. And these works are all in response to being forms of resistance and liberation against this kind of ongoing forms of colonialism in Brazil. And we have seen more recently with the very far right administrations, most recently of Jair Bolsonaro, that have been causing the highest rates of, for example, deforestation in the Amazon region. And we've seen also the highest rates of murder of environmental activists and indigenous leaders. And then the mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are all of these kinds of present forms of crisis that these artists and activists are responding to, but I would like to also contextualize that these are just ongoing forms of colonialism that continue into this kind of neo-colonial moment. And so I draw attention to the kinds of violences that these women of color face in Brazil. And by looking at these often missed strategies that they develop in their social life, in their art making practices and performances in order to survive their multiple oppressions, I want to uplift their really important and crucial work. So I want to seek, again, this kind of radical political action that occurs outside of these normative scripts of election and public protest for what they have to offer us. There is a precedent of political and protest art in Brazil, especially during the military dictatorship from 1964 and 85. During this time, we saw a rise of performance art, protest art, and feminist art as a way to speak out very intentionally against this violent regime. However, there was not enough representation due to discrimination and various other forces that made these movements predominantly white and very masculine. The amount of Black and Indigenous artists' visibility was nearly none. So I follow these artists who have themselves named the important link between art and politics, but note that the difference here in like my study and this kind of contemporary moment is this interesting rise in Black and Indigenous artists having representation in the art world, access to these artistic spaces, and their work having greater visibility. While their work is always in kind of conversation with these kinds of political moments, these artists are redefining the category of art by placing it outside of a lineage of this Eurocentric canon and seeing art instead as a method of freedom planning and as a tool of warfare against the violence of the nation state. Tucano artist Tayari Tucano says that art is not a thing separate from a way of knowing or living, and thus the word art has no translation into almost any indigenous language in the present day Brazil region. Artwork then is an extension of these indigenous epistemologies, and not just a mere representation of it. And the same can kind of be said for the Black artists in my study as well. So this kind of matrix of body geography and other than human collaborators and alternative epistemologies are interwoven in my analysis into a term that I call, and as we saw in my title, geocorporeality of art. And it reflects this kind of premise that decolonial political efforts by women of color are inherently embodied, geographic, and artistic, and it relies on this kind of web in order to reimagine and materialize other worlds and ways of being. Their works defend the right to life, and that includes the collective social realm of humans, but also other than human kin, such as the water, the forest, the air, against these kind of ongoing colonial paradigms, and this I argue is a political act. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to offer you all some examples of these. So here on the left, this underwater kind of image is Aline Mata. Her work was sparked by her grandmother sharing her secret that her mother, so her great-great-grandmother, was sexually assaulted by her employer's son, and that speaks to kind of an ongoing process of like racial violence in Brazil. And so she goes through this kind of archival project to discover her family history, but is met by the limits of this very racist archive. And so what she does instead is she creates screen prints of these documents and images of her family and takes them to these alternative archives, such as the water. And these archives of water are throughout Brazil, Portugal, and Sierra Leone as she tracks her family's kind of lineage. And she places them in the water in each of these sites. And she kind of asks what else we can kind of learn by doing this kind of like embodied geographic work. And then on the right, we have Jader Espel, who creates these inflatable serpent structures that are of the Makushi cosmology. These serpents cross several worlds and have no beginning and no end, and they are considered defenders of the Makushi. So these snakes are placed on a lake that is facing a sculpture of Pedro Cabral, which was a Portuguese explorer and colonizer of Brazil. So these serpents have come to sort of like defend against that sculpture. in the colonial project at large. Next slide, please. So on the left, we have Dayara Tucano, and here she's performing Cantos para a Vida, Songs for Life, at the Pinacoteca in São Paulo. And this was part of the first exhibition at that Museum of Contemporary Indigenous Art. Here she wears a full cape of red feathers from head to toe. She has a matraca, and she also has this mirror in front of her face. The mirror is also reflecting this kind of European settlers used mirrors to barter with indigenous peoples, but it also here reflects the audience to kind of implicate them in the action that she does. So she moves throughout the museum gallery singing and shaking her matraca, and she is addressing with these songs a lot of very colonial paintings that kind of were part of these kind of stereotype perspectives of indigenous people for so long. And then on the right, we have Rosana Paulinho, and she subverts scientific racism of Black women in Brazil by uplifting feminine archetypes of the Yoruba religion. And she cites these deities of their religion, such as Oya and Oshun, who are powerful beings and they're warriors and they control the weather. So she intervenes in an archive of racist imagery by rejecting those tropes and drawing on these mythological women to uplift the role of Black women in Brazil. Next slide, please. So just to say that my methods are diverse, I use visual analysis, discourse analysis, close reading, archival research, and ethnography. And I'm trying to fill this gap in this research, which really hasn't made it past the form of the essay or the exhibition catalog and hasn't really made its way to the US Academy, which I believe would be really beneficial for these kind of hemispheric conversations that are happening around decolonization, art, and politics. And essentially is trying to just uplift this work that these women are doing, their gendered labor and practices, the decolonial epistemologies that they're putting forth, and staking the claim that everyday performance is capable of accomplishing disruptive work in the world. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for coming. And yes.
Thank you. I want to remind our audience that these scholars may be available to speak to your branch. As you've noticed, these were just 5 to 7 minute snippets, just little pieces of their work. And they practiced and practiced to try to get it down within that time frame, but they can do a longer presentation for you either virtually. Some of them might be available to actually attend. We just ask that to help with the student schedules, that you schedule something to present before the end of April 2023. Generally in May, they're wrapping up finals or dissertation deadlines, that type of thing. Please go online to the California website and complete our online speaker request form, and do that soon. As you can see, the AAUW fund, we have trailblazing women. We have heard in the 4 sessions since mid-October, 35 of these scholars. And we certainly encourage your donations, your continued donations for AAUW Fund. Just please state that the donation is in honor of an AAUW event. Next. Just a couple of reminders on how AAUW Fund helps your branch. The guidance and support. We actually have a fund director, local fund director peer group meeting this coming Thursday evening. Just a short meeting to answer some questions, to give some tips on fundraising, and to look at how to read the fund report. We certainly encourage the giving. Next. there are many, I haven't counted up recently, but I think 10 or 12 separate funds. To get a full list, I would say go online at nationalAAUW.org and you'll find a very complete list. But these are the 4 that we have found in California that are most often used. Reminder that the Greatest Needs Fund, the ones that you generally give to, they're not restricted to the fellowships or special projects. And that's why it's especially important. We've got the Nick Whistle and we have the Moon Lecce, which you've just shown. We have a fairly new one, the Diane Owens Honorary Fund. So if you want to give to that, you can find it online or link to it here. Next. Just a reminder of some key dates. December 31st is the deadline for this year's fund donations. It doesn't mean you can't give other times. Certainly you can. But if you wanted to qualify for a named gift nomination, you need to do that by December. The nomination forms are online. February 1st is for the state name gift, and March 1st is for the branch named gift. Every year, the California Fund Committee honors California members who've done outstanding work in supporting the programs and goals of AAUW Fund and/or AAUW California. For branches, a named gift is a special way to pay tribute to an individual, a group, or an organization giving extraordinary service to AAUW. You can nominate a named gift honoree for each $750 contributed by a branch or branch member on or before December 31st. And the state name gift is given to an AUW member who's done outstanding work to promote programs and goals of AUW California. Only one nomination per branch. Again, those forms are on the AAUW website. Next. Showcasing here the people, some of the many people that we'd like to thank, the success of the team effort here, and especially Sandy Gabe, the president of AUW California, our fund committee, and our communications committee. Those of you who've not seen this previously, you may want to stay for our final presentation. Katrina Sunbreeze, and she's the Senior Director of Institutional Advancement at AAUW's National Office, and she's responsible for developing and implementing all aspects of AAUW's philanthropic and dues revenue generating programs. She has over 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership. So you can hear from her now. And at that point, we just want to say thank you so much for attending.
You California members, it is a great pleasure to join you all today and share with you more information about AAUW's greatest needs. In my role as Senior Director of Institutional Advancement, I lead our membership and fundraising teams. It's my goal today to articulate what AAUW's greatest needs are, provide examples of what greatest needs donations have supported in the past, and highlight the important role that branches and members play in elevating our mission-centered work. First, what is the importance of greatest needs? It supports our AAUW strategic priorities, sustains AAUW well into the future, empowers AAUW National to be nimble and responsive to current events and issues, and maintains and expands our national presence. Next, what are our strategic priorities? It includes education and training, economic security, leadership, governance, and sustainability. Now, some examples of greatest needs supported work include our research, supporting the updates to and dissemination of simple truth and deeper in debt, our programming, which fills the gaps when restricted funding does not cover 100% of the costs. These programs include Nick Whistle, Work Smart, Start Smart, Money Smart, and Empower. Our policy activities, advocating for AUW's values. The majority of our policy team's budget is supported by Greatest Needs. Operations, supporting our infrastructure and sustainability, adding to unrestricted reserves helps us to weather future economic instability. Membership. Greatest Needs Funds allows us to provide support to our branches and states and offer opportunities to better connect and engage with you. This includes our Connect team and site resources. Lastly, communications. In 2021, we had over 3.1 million social media impressions, and our work has been cited in national publications such as ABC News, Diverse Issues in Higher Education, Refinery 29, MSNBC, New York Magazine, Philanthropy News Digest, Fortune, Market Watch, Forbes, The Hill, Yahoo, and many more. In particular, I'd like to highlight Greatest Needs support of AUW's research, education, and advocacy work, as we have some powerful impact numbers to share. Over 188,000 individuals have taken AUW's salary negotiation programs. AUW's 2018 landmark research report, Deeper in Debt, Women and Student Loans, was updated. 145 colleges and universities, including 32 minority-serving institutions and historically Black colleges and universities, offer AUW's Start Smart salary negotiation training. Over 1,400 college women leaders from 300 campuses nationwide attended AUW National Conference for College Women Student Leaders, or Nick Whistle, in 2021 and 2022. 68,000 plus letters were sent to elected officials via AUW's 2-minute activist program, and over $6 million, which for us is a historic record, in fellowships and grants were awarded to 320 women due to the fully endowed Fellowships and Grants Fund. Our Greatest Needs ensures AUW's seat at the table in critical conversations advancing gender equity for women and girls. This includes our seat at the White House Gender Policy Council, UN Women, the UN entity for gender equity and the empowerment of women, the White House Equal Pay Summit with President and Mrs. Biden, US NGO Commission on the Status of Women, Speaker Pelosi's Women's History Month celebration this past year, the Institute for Women's Policy Research Power Summit, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs Special Consultative Status, and many more. Our branches play an important role in supporting Greatest Needs through fundraising. In addition to making a local impact, branch fundraising for National Greatest Needs ensures each branch is also supporting AUW's mission on a national level. By reaching out to your local community and fundraising from both members and non-members, branches are helping to build awareness about AUW's mission and long-standing history as a champion of equity for women and girls. We have many AUW funds chairs in branches across the country, but of course, especially in California. And these funds chairs lead and support branch fundraising initiatives, assist with stewarding and thanking our local donors, serve as a point of contact from the branch to the national office. And we are so appreciative of the important role that these funds chairs and other member leaders across the country and in California especially are playing. Now more than ever, we need your support. Whether it's the catastrophic effect of the pandemic on women's employment, challenges to women's rights, which seem to pop up every day, snail-paced progress on pay equity and leadership positions for women, or the over $900 billion in student debt held by women, and women's lack of economic security that we continue to face. All of these issues make it even more pressing that we receive your support.